I have always asked questions. As I was growing up, my parents were more likely to ask me, "Did you ask good questions?" than, "How was school today?" when I came home from school. I remember being eager to be the one to ask the four questions at the Seder. It didn't take long before I figured out that the answers to my questions would be determined to some extent by who I asked, or to notice that some people always answer a question with a question. As a teacher, I've always tried to encourage my students to ask questions. When we think about questions rather than answers, we approach learning and knowledge differently. An emphasis on questions is part of Jewish text study. When we study Jewish texts, we begin with our own questions of the text in front of us. We then move to the commentaries where the answers to these questions may be, along with the answers to questions that we hadn't even considered. When we are examining the commentaries themselves, a suggested approach is to ask, what is the question that this commentator is answering? By emphasizing questions rather than answers, we begin to value the journey more than the destination and soon see that we are learning more in looking for an answer than in learning the answer. Each year at Passover, an emphasis on questions is formalized and made part of the Seder as the four questions. We spend our time at Seders with questions, formal and informal, but there is a fifth question built into the Seder, and it arises from our Torah portion this week, Parashat Va'era. Besides the four questions and the four children, another four in the Seder is the 4 cups of wine that we drink to correspond with the 4 promises that God makes to us in Exodus chapter 6. I will free you from the labor of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and through extraordinary chastisements. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. I will bring you into the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. Just as the 4 questions don't really seem to be 4 questions, but one question with 4 statements, this series of 4 promises seems to be different than advertised. How many promises are there? 5, 7, which would be 1 for each verb. For the rabbis, the promise is number 5, 4 of which were fulfilled, and 1 of which would be fulfilled in the future. The problem was that the question of the number of cups of wine to drink at the Seder couldn't be resolved to anyone's satisfaction. So how many cups of wine are there at the Seder? 4 and a question. 4 cups we drink, and the 5th cup is in the center for Elijah the prophet and to function as sort of a string around our finger to remind us of something so that we don't forget. Elijah the prophet is the one who will bring advance word of the Messiah or the Messianic age and the final redemption. That's why we invite him to every Seder and every bris and sing about him at the end of Shabbat. We are looking to the day when the final promise will be fulfilled. Elijah is also the one who will answer the questions that we can't. When the rabbis at the time of the Talmud came up against a whopper of a problem that they were unable to solve, they would record the discussion and then say teku, which is an acronym for Elijah will solve such puzzles and problems. So Elijah's cup is not just there for him to drink from, but to remind us of the first question we want to ask him when he arrives. It is vital to us as Jews to question and wrestle with problems, and it is inevitable that we will face insoluble questions. But we need to remember that there is nothing beyond questioning, not even God. We are Israel, which comes from the Hebrew word meaning, He will wrestle with God. Our questions about God and our relationship with God as individuals and as Jews are part of our wrestling and therefore part of who we are. We may not get the answers to our questions until Elijah comes, but until then, there is much to learn from the process of questioning, because the journey is more important than the destination. And we gain more in looking for an answer than in learning the answer. Besides, who knows when Elijah will come?